The sun is going down. You're standing in the open, and within minutes, you won't be able to see your own hand in front of your face. No flashlight, no street light, no moon tonight. And somewhere out there, something with far better night vision than you is already watching, patiently, from just beyond where your eyes can reach. This isn't a horror movie. This was simply Tuesday, for roughly 300,000 years of human history. And your body still remembers it, whether you realize it or not, in ways that are still measurably, scientifically real, right now, tonight, in your own nervous system. Here's something most people never think about. Human eyes are frankly terrible in the dark. Not slightly worse than other animals, dramatically, embarrassingly worse. Our eyes evolved primarily for daylight color vision and fine detail, built around light-sensitive cells called cones, densely packed at the center of the retina. Cones are what let you read this sentence, distinguish colors, and focus sharply. But cones have one major weakness. They need relatively bright light to function at all. In true darkness, your vision shifts almost entirely to a different set of cells called rods. Rods are far more sensitive to low light, but they can't detect color, and they're nearly useless for fine detail, which is part of why everything looks blurry and gray in the dark. Even worse, rods take real time to activate. Full dark adaptation, the process by which your eyes maximize their light sensitivity, takes 20 to 30 minutes of sitting in darkness before your night vision even reaches its peak. In the wild, that's 20 to 30 minutes of dangerous vulnerability every single night. Now compare that to the animals that hunted our ancestors. Leopards, hyenas, and wolves all share something humans completely lack: a reflective layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum. It's literally why animal eyes glow in photographs and headlights. That layer catches light that passes through the retina the first time and bounces it back through a second time, roughly doubling the amount of usable light their eyes can extract from near total darkness. Many nocturnal predators also have vertically slit pupils rather than round ones, allowing a far greater range of dilation, letting in dramatically more light when needed. Humans have neither adaptation. We are, by nearly every measurable standard, one of the most visually disadvantaged large mammals on the African savanna after sunset. This isn't just theory or speculation. There's direct, physical fossil evidence that early human relatives were actively hunted at night. The skull of a young hominin known as the Taung Child, discovered in South Africa, shows puncture marks that closely match the talons of a large bird of prey, almost certainly killed and carried off, likely during low-light hours, when a small, poorly sighted primate made an easy, visible only to the predator target. This wasn't an isolated case either. Cave sites across Africa and Eurasia show bones of early hominins alongside the remains of extinct predators: massive saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas far larger than any alive today, and cave lions capable of taking down prey many times their own size. For an enormous stretch of evolutionary history, our ancestors weren't simply occasionally at risk after dark. Genuinely, quite literally, they were regularly on the menu. So it makes complete sense that darkness itself triggers a very real, very measurable physical reaction inside your body, even now. Reduced visibility activates your amygdala, the brain's primary threat detection center, which increases heart rate, spikes cortisol and adrenaline production, and sharpens your hearing, all before you've even consciously registered that anything is wrong. This is why nearly every human culture ever studied documents some version of childhood fear of the dark, almost always emerging at a strikingly similar age, somewhere around 2 to 4 years old, regardless of geography, language, or upbringing. It isn't a personality quirk, and it isn't something parents accidentally teach their children through scary stories. It's an inherited survival reflex, quietly wired in by an extraordinarily long and extraordinarily real history of nighttime predation. For hundreds of thousands of years, that fear had exactly one reliable solution: fire. The earliest strong evidence of habitually controlled fire use comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back roughly 1 million years, where researchers found burned bone fragments and ash deposited deep enough inside the cave that they couldn't plausibly have been caused by a wildfire. Similar early evidence has since turned up at Zhoukoudian in China and Kesem Cave in Israel, suggesting the deliberate, sustained use of fire spread gradually across multiple human populations over hundreds of thousands of years. Fire didn't just provide warmth, it solved the exact sensory disadvantage we just described, in the simplest way imaginable. Because while human eyes are catastrophically weak in true darkness, they work perfectly well by firelight, instantly leveling a playing field that evolution itself had never given us. Anthropologists estimate a typical, well-maintained campfire creates a genuine, functional zone of safety roughly 30 feet across. Inside that radius, most predators reliably avoid approaching, deterred by both the light itself and the unpredictable movement of flame. Outside that same radius, the advantage flips completely and immediately back to whatever happens to be hunting in the dark that particular night. This isn't some romanticized guess pulled from old campfire stories. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer communities, groups like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Juhawansi of the Kalahari, have documented repeatedly and consistently that individuals who wander away from the fire circle at night face a measurably higher risk of predator encounters. Not centuries ago, in some distant, romanticized past. Today, in the present, among people alive right now. With vision effectively disabled beyond the reach of the firelight, something else had to compensate, and quickly: hearing. Multiple studies on human sensory processing show that in low-light conditions, the brain actively reallocates attention away from vision and heavily toward auditory input. Part of why an unfamiliar sound at night feels so much more unsettling than the exact same sound heard during broad daylight. Around ancient campsites, this heightened auditory awareness likely translated into something very practical and very structured. Rotating shifts of wakefulness through the night, with at least one member of the group alert enough at any given moment to catch the snap of a distant branch, or a low growl just beyond the edge of the firelight, functioning, in effect, as a living early warning system for everyone else quietly sleeping nearby. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you, though. None of this ancient fear simply switched off just because humanity eventually invented streetlights, security cameras, and locked front doors. Controlled studies on modern humans still show measurably elevated stress responses, increased heart rate, rising skin conductance, heightened startle reflexes, when walking through unfamiliar dark spaces, even in objectively, statistically safe, predator-free modern cities. Children reliably, predictably develop a fear of the dark at that same strikingly consistent early age we mentioned earlier, worldwide, across radically different cultures and parenting styles. Not because every parent on Earth independently decided to teach the exact same lesson, but because the underlying neurological wiring for that fear already appears to be there, quietly waiting, long before any actual bad experience ever needed to happen. You feel that small, oddly irrational flicker of unease walking to your car alone in a dim, empty parking lot, or reaching to flip off the light at the very top of a dark staircase. Understand exactly, precisely, what's actually happening underneath that feeling. That isn't your imagination overreacting to nothing. That's roughly 300,000 years of accumulated evolutionary memory, quietly, insistently reminding you of a rule your ancestors learned the hard way, over and over again. Stay close to the light, or risk becoming something else's dinner. You'll flip a switch tonight without thinking twice about it, the same way you do every single night of your life. But somewhere underneath that effortless, automatic switch, a much older, far more careful version of you is still standing quietly at the very edge of the firelight, watching, listening, waiting for the dark to make its next move.